Happy New Year. Hello again. Welcome to another episode of
Mm.
Leading from Alignment with our good friend. You remember him from last year, John Opalewski. How are you today, John?
I'm doing good, Jim. Happy
Good.
New Year to you as well.
Thank you.
I'm excited about 2025
Yeah.
and what's out there for our pastors and our preachers and
Right on.
the guys and gals in our network that we love so
Yeah.
much. And
Right on.
I'd like to start off with this is kind of like an annual ritual for us on the
It is.
podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to start off our podcast here by reflecting on some of the biggest ideas, lessons, aha moments from the year prior. And I think it makes sense for all of us watching and listening to do the same thing, to
Yeah.
reflect on what were the two or three or four things that you learned in 2024 that you want to carry into the new
Right.
year. You
Yeah.
don't want to forget these. You want them to be like rock solid in your world. And so
Yeah.
that's where I'd like to go today. And I hopefully my ahas will be helpful to those who are listening or
All
watching,
right.
or else it's just going to be me who's happy about all of this stuff.
Right on.
So here's the aha number one, and it's this: the ministry I lead wasn't my idea; it was God's.
Yeah.
Isn't my baby; it's God's. And no matter what happens with it, God has my best interests in mind.
Love that.
Um,
Mhm.
2024, Jim, was a great year for us. And right in parallel, it was a hard year for us.
Yeah.
We made a lot of structural changes in
Hmm.
2024 that we believe will pay off in 2025, but those changes were painful.
Yeah.
Our largest ministry partner closed their doors in 2024.
Right.
That was painful. And we miss working with those fine people.
Yeah.
For the first time in a very long time, Jim, we dealt with a summer slump.
Yeah.
That never happens to us.
Yeah.
But for some reason this year during the summer, it was crickets. And
Yeah.
so while we ended the year well, there was a stretch where the stress of all of that change began to weigh heavily on me. I wasn't sleeping well.
Yeah.
I felt anxious and uncertain
Yeah.
about the future. And I was carrying that with me. And you walked with me, and some of our key leaders in the organization walked with me through all of
Yeah.
that season. Which, by the way, I'm very grateful for you and for our key
Yeah.
leaders. But
Great
I
group.
was in church. This was last Sunday in August. I
Yeah.
was in church, and I came into church with all of this on my shoulders, on my mind. And
Mm.
our associate pastor got up during the transition between worship and the preaching, and he said, um, I was reading Psalm 145 this morning, and it just dawned on me that there were going to be a number of people here today at church who are carrying heavy
Mm.
burdens. You're losing sleep, you're
Wow.
anxious. And I mean, and I know that I'm one of that group.
Yeah.
And he said this, he said, I feel like the Lord just spoke to my heart today and said, you need to release it to the Lord
Mm.
right now. And I
Right
felt
on.
that was a rhema word for me, Jim. And I
Yeah.
remember responding right in the moment to the Lord saying, God, how do I do
Mm.
this? How do I release all this weight to you? And within
Yeah.
seconds, I
Yeah.
heard in my heart, John, Converge coaching was not your idea. It was mine. It was never your idea. It was
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
It's not your baby. It's mine. And no matter what happens in the future, good or bad, I have your best interests in mind.
Love it.
And it was like a load just fell off me
Yeah.
in that moment. And I've been sleeping better.
Yeah.
I've had less anxiety. Now, I would be lying to you if I said I had no anxiety,
Right.
but much less anxiety, much better perspective.
Right.
And I would just say, Pastor, the ministry you lead wasn't your idea, it was God's. It's not your baby, it's his. And whether it prospers or it doesn't, if you're putting in the proper effort,
Yeah.
he has your very best interest in mind. So, Jim, that was just a huge
Yeah.
aha for me
I
last year.
love that. My terrible analogy, but it's one that comes to mind. My sister was the school bully of my elementary school. Um, I walked with a certain swagger that I could not back in her absence. Does that make sense? So if
Yes.
somebody came after me and tried to bully me, I'm like, well, you know who my sister is, right? Don't make me sick my sister on you. And I knew that
Right.
if I could find Janet, I'd be fine. And if I couldn't, then I had to back my words. And I think in some ways that's what you're saying is like my dad can beat up your dad, whatever that fear is. I'm not saying you don't have
Yeah.
strength. I'm not saying at the right
Yeah.
moment, the right time, the right way, I'm invulnerable. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I know that if I can just find something greater than you, that I will be okay. And I can walk with a certain confidence, knowing that my sister can beat up every other person in the school. My sister was a roller derby queen. She was tough, man.
Yeah.
And yeah, it took me years to not be afraid of her as an adult. So yeah, but I like that. I like that thought of I don't need to know the answers. I have someone stronger than whatever the answer of that question might be. I have peace
That's right.
because greater is he who's in me, or
Yeah.
that there's a scripture somebody said recently about the peace that passes all understanding. But at some point we have to relinquish our right to understand
Yeah.
if we're going to walk in a peace that passes that understanding and
Right.
just trust. Simple, not as an easy, but uncomplicated trust. I trust you. This is yours.
Right.
I didn't call me. I didn't anoint me. I don't decide if I succeed or not. So my job is to be someone of quality and fidelity, good and
That's right.
faithful. I'm going to
That's
show
right.
up on time. I'm going to give my best. Not whatever happens, I don't care. Like I do care deeply, but I'm not going to care so deeply that I put myself in God's throne as if I have the final say in any of this. I can just
Right.
bring what I bring. I can bring what I've been given, but beyond that, it's in God's hands, and I trust those
Yeah.
hands implicitly.
Jim, I think, no, I know this about me that my default in the past has always been when things got hard. And look, if you've been leading an organization for any length of time, you're going to have some seasons that are hard. It's
Yes, you are.
it's just the way it is.
Yeah, right.
But my tendency is to clutch, to grab,
Yeah,
to try to control.
yeah,
And I really feel like what the Lord was getting at with this first aha was, John, stop that.
mm,
Stop trying to control.
yeah,
And so part of the letting go of that doesn't mean I'm not working hard. It doesn't mean that I'm not being diligent. Like you said, it doesn't mean I don't care.
yeah,
But I realize that if I do my part, whatever happens, God has my best interest in mind.
yeah,
He loves me that much.
yeah,
And so I hope that first aha encourages you, Pastor, today. And it puts you at peace. It puts you at ease. It allows you to do what God's called you to
yeah.
do without being frantic
Right.
about the outcome.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
here's the second one, Jim. Second aha. I don't like this one very much.
Yeah.
And it's this: pain is my greatest teacher.
Yes. All of us.
I wish the exact opposite was true. I wish laying on a beach in Hawaii sipping raspberry iced tea was my greatest teacher.
No.
But here's what I've discovered, that the lessons from learned from pain are indelible,
Yeah.
and they are often transformative if we
Yeah.
learn how to cooperate with God.
Yeah.
Now, you all know my experience with the long dark tunnel of major depression
Yeah.
and the crippling anxiety.
Mm.
To date, that's been the most painful season of my life, and that happened,
Sure.
a long time ago. But God used that painful season to temper me, to bring deep change and growth, to help me understand, Jim, what is really important in life.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know it, that he brought something beautiful and life-giving out of that that seems to
Yeah.
be helping other people.
Right.
So, Pastor, let pain, your current pain, teach you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to learn things through your pain that you cannot learn any other way. Now, there are some things that we would like you to be preventive about, a lot of things we'd like you to be
Yeah.
preventive about, and you should be, but that will not eliminate pain in your life. So, pain is my greatest teacher, and I'm not happy about that.
Yeah. I, as a pastor, we hear this a lot. Like, why did God allow that? Or why didn't God
Yeah.
stop that? Or where was God when? And what we're always talking about is the confusion that comes when we're in pain. If God is good, then why is something bad happening to me? But think about this. A loving God has to give us the ability to feel pain, especially in a fallen world, because it tells us something's wrong, where it's located, so that we can do something about it. Now, once we understand that journey, you can help other people through this. And I you're a humble man, and if you didn't know better, you would think Converge was it was a wonderful local ministry. But I know, because I'm behind the scenes, that the people that Converge has influenced, because of the pain you've been through, Converge came out of that pain. That was the crucible
Yeah.
of the gold of Converge. That now 3.6 million people have been directly affected by the people that you have one on one, or the team has one on one affected. And if there's 360 million people in America, that means 1 out of 100 people in America has now been directly affected by a terrible season you went through that God brought you out of. Is all that true statements?
Yeah, and I think, the way we get to that calculus
Yeah,
is the amount of leaders that we've influenced in the last almost 12 years now. It's reached
yeah,
almost to 17,000.
yeah,
And then we do a little math,
yeah,
and we're very conservative about the math.
yeah, yeah,
And we, like every leader we influence has influence over X amount of people. And that's
yeah,
where we get to about 3.5 million
yeah,
that
yeah.
have been influenced by the ripple effect
Yes. And I,
of
and
what
I
we.
think, again, if you had not been through that dark season and in all that pain, and then the process of coming out of it, and then humbly sharing that story, and all the good things that have come out of it beyond that story. Because when you start telling your story, pastors started, leaders started asking, and hey,
Yeah.
would you talk to this? And then a team gathered, because you gathered them, and people want to play on that team, and they want to be a part of the story. So again, if you're in the middle of something right now, we understand how difficult that is. It's not like, hey, this is
Yes.
a great thing, I'm in agony. We're not saying that, but getting your eyes off of your pain to what God can do in time, and
Mm.
not say, so cheer up, you're in agony. That's not what I mean. But man, pain is universal, but it isn't
Yes.
always used. God will not waste anything you're
Right.
going through. So that thought again, that I'm in pain, like, no, you're being taught.
That's
Journal
right.
when you're in pain. Talk about with people that you trust when you're in pain.
Right.
Don't be afraid to share, even in a sermon or a leadership thing, what you're learning because of pain. Don't waste seasons of pain, because they come for a reason and they go for a reason. And the God of
Right.
all comfort comforts us in all of our afflictions, so we can comfort others. Like, our pain will go, but the comfort stays and is transferable. So John's season
Yeah.
is over with, but the comfort he received is transferable.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry if you're in pain right now. I don't mean to sound trite. I don't know when
Right.
it's going to end. I don't know if the next light at the end of the tunnel is another oncoming train. No one knows but God. But I know
Right.
this: God will not waste this season, and you will come out the other side. It didn't come to stay, it came to pass. So when it passes, man, you come out of those
Right.
seasons with gold, refined gold.
100%. And we would encourage you, if you are in pain, to reach out to us.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
you're going to be reaching out to a group of coaches who've all been
Yeah,
in pain
yeah,
one way, shape, or form.
yeah,
And they're not going to try to speed up your recovery or put a band-aid on what you're going through, but to
yeah,
help you process, to learn how to cooperate with what God is doing in this
yeah.
season in your
Good.
world.
Yeah,
And you'll come out of this season, the potential. I, Jim, I never dreamed that God would use pain in my life to produce the amount and quality
yeah,
of fruit that's been produced out
yeah,
of it. only God can do that. He's the only being
Yeah.
who has the
Yeah.
brilliance in them to do that. So if you're
Yeah.
suffering today, our hearts
Yeah.
go out to you.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
want you to not suffer alone. Uh, Hit us up, uh, and we'll see what we can do to be helpful to you. But pain
Yeah.
has the potential to
Yeah.
be your greatest teacher. Here's the
Sure.
third aha, and this one was an aha for me. And if you're listening today, you might think, well, that's I knew that 20 years ago. Well, sometimes I'm a little slow to the uptake, So, but here it is. Not everything I try is going to work,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Right.
Now, look, I grew up where making a mistake was not looked upon kindly
Right.
in a kind of a rigid home. I was afraid to make a mistake. I thought making a mistake was a reflection of my value, a
Hmm.
reflection of my worthiness of being loved. So
Right.
you can imagine, that with that kind of, and that came more from my dad than my mom. My mom was much more the other side of
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
much more affirming. But I realized that while her influence on my life was amazing, my dad's influence on my life, and my dad and I made our peace, and
Good.
we ended, with the last few years of his life were the best years I had with my dad. So there's a
Right.
lot of healing
Yeah.
that took place there. Um, but there is this like internal thing about making a mistake and what is it, how does that look and what are people going to think about me? Are they going to
Yeah.
think I'm a bad leader? I don't hear from God, all this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. Um, Experimenting, whether it's a new program or a new hire, is an important part of leadership. And if it doesn't work out, there's a couple things I think that I've learned last year that experiments don't always work. That's why we call them
Yep.
experiments.
Right.
Um,
Right.
that failed experiments happen in every organization that wants to grow. If you don't want to fail, if that's your goal in life is to not
Yeah.
fail at something in your organization, you can play it safe and maybe not fail. You will not reach your full
Yeah.
potential as an organization. If you don't want to fail, don't try anything
Right.
new.
Right.
And then here's the other piece, Jim, that experiments that don't work out have the ability to bring clarity to you and your team
Yeah.
and the direction your organization needs to go. Now, a couple of things that we tried in 2024 didn't work out the way we anticipated.
Yeah.
And while I felt disappointed by that, what emerged and my leadership team really helped me with this. I don't know if you remember
Hmm.
the meeting we had probably about a few months ago when we talked through some of this stuff, that I had a clearer sense of priority for the
Hmm.
next 12 to 18 months for our
Yes.
organization.
Yeah.
So a mistake or a failure or thing, I don't even know if it was a mistake or a failure as much as it was, it just didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Actually brought a sense of, okay, I've got more clarity now than I had before that thing didn't work
Yes.
out. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just because something doesn't work doesn't mean, it might be timing. It might be the
Yeah.
idea itself that needs modification. It might be the person or people you asked to lead in those departments, or there's lots of things. But again, narrowing down what didn't work so that it can, the next time you take a run at it, that is what you do. I mean, it's leadership, right? We call
Yeah.
it experimenting for a season. If we want to make a major change in the church, we're going to do an experiment for a season, and if it works, we're going to make it permanent. But if you say we're making a change, everybody gets shook up. So that word
Yeah.
experiment and that time frame, that vague time frame called a season, really seems to help people relax a little bit because they're afraid of failure. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of progress, whatever it is. But I like that thought. We're going to try some things and creating the environment on your teams where if it doesn't work, you might punch each other in the arm a little bit, laugh at each other a bit, and then move on. You are not a failure because your idea did not work. You're
Right.
We succeeded in the attempt. We failed in the outcome, but we succeeded
Yes.
in the attempt. And I think growing organizations, any living thing needs to modify, whether it's roots or fruits, it's all got to change to be productive.
Right. And in the business world, I was there 20 years, and you would think that I should not have had to learn that in
Yeah.
2024 because in the business world, innovation, I mean, it's like happens all the
Yeah.
time. They're always trying stuff
Yeah.
and it doesn't work. They just pick themselves off and move on to the next thing. You know, they didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
They try to draw some learning points from it. But
Yeah.
this third one, Pastor, not everything you try is going to work,
Yeah.
and that's all right.
Yeah.
If you come at it with that experimental mindset and even
Yeah.
the experimental posture, you know, I think sometimes we get in trouble, pastors, when we say the Lord has spoken to me about
Oh yeah.
yes.
You better have heard the Lord speak to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
encourage you to get confirmation of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
from multiple sources before you go down that path. But you set yourself up, right? If it
Right.
doesn't work out, like people start to question,
Sure.
do you even know how to hear the Lord anymore? So,
Right.
you know, be
Right.
careful with how you treat yourself in these moments, how you communicate. And then let me give you one more. So
Yeah.
the first one is, well, I'll just go right into number four.
Okay.
Here it is. We did a podcast on this earlier this year, so I'm not going to go into all the details, but this was, Jim, this was foundationally altering. It was life altering.
Yeah.
Here it is. I'm a son
Yeah.
who is perfectly loved by his father. And with me, that father is well pleased.
Yeah.
I've learned in a fresh, deep, and I'm continuing to work on my identity, his affection, and his affirmation of me.
Beautiful.
Identity. My core identity is not what I do. It's not Converge coaching.
Yeah.
It's not what I have.
Mm.
And it's not even what other people say about me. My core identity is that I'm an adopted son of my Heavenly Father. Success, I'm a son.
Yeah.
Something doesn't work out, I'm a son. I preached a message that didn't connect,
Yeah.
I'm a son. Ephesians 1:5, he adopted me in love according to
Yeah.
his will and pleasure. So, Pastor, your
Mm.
identity is not what you do for a living. It's not the size of church you lead. It's
Yeah.
not what your people say about you. No, you're a son, you're a daughter.
Yeah.
And then the second piece of affection.
Yeah.
I'm loved. And it's not human love. This is like
Right.
other kind of love. It's
Yeah.
I'm loved perfectly. I'm loved completely. I'm loved immeasurably. I can't measure
Yeah.
God's love for me. It's immeasurable. It's unconditional. And it's on the basis of covenant,
Yeah.
not contract. God's
Yeah.
love for me is not contractual. It's covenantal.
Yeah.
And I've known in my head for a long time that God loved me.
Mm.
But now I'm getting to that place where I'm convinced in my heart
Right on.
that he loves me and that love is not based on my performance. I don't perform. I don't obey God to get loved.
Mm.
I obey because I am loved.
Right. Huge difference.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes we struggle with obedience because we don't understand
Yeah.
that I'm not obeying God so he'll love me more. I'm
Yeah.
obeying God because he does love me.
Right.
I think it's in Romans where Paul says it's God's kindness that leads us toward repentance. And so this whole idea
Mm.
of God's love, I can't be separated from it. It's higher than I can measure. It's longer. It's deeper. It's wider.
Yeah.
Um, and knowing that nobody can steal that from me.
Right.
Nobody can take that from me.
Yeah.
It's very calming and grounding and centering for me. And then the third piece of this,
Mm.
he's well pleased with me. That's been
Yeah.
the hardest part of this three-pronged foundation
Mm.
for me. But to actually be convinced that God delights over me, he rejoices over me. The Bible says he sings over us.
Yeah.
And because of the power of Jesus' blood, My sins have been erased as though they never happened.
Yeah.
So God knows I'm not perfect, but he
Yeah.
sees me positionally that way. I think about you have grandchildren, I have five, you have
Yeah.
three, I believe. And
Yeah.
here's how I see my grandkids. They absolutely delight me. I am
Yeah.
well pleased with them. Even
Yeah.
when they're naughty,
Right. Yeah.
I see the
Yeah.
divine, I see the divine imprint
Yeah.
on these little ones. And I know I act silly and goofy, and I act with my grandkids in a way I would never act in public, probably.
Yeah. I have video evidence of it actually. If anyone wants to see it, text me. Yeah.
And and I know I'm just kind of it's just a grandpa-ing is just a little sliver, I
Yeah.
think, of how God sees us. But Jim, I believe this that foundationally, if I believe and I know if I work and live from my identity instead of for it,
Yeah.
if I work from affection, not for it, and if I live and work from acceptance and approval,
Yeah.
not for it, I'm going to have a healthier life.
Yeah.
It's life altering, and it doesn't just affect my leadership, it affects my marriage, it affects
Yeah.
my family, it affects how I interact with people. People can't mess with me as much if I
Yeah.
know these three things. The devil
Yeah.
can't mess with me as much if I'm convinced of these three things. So that's the
Yeah.
fourth aha. Wonder
Yeah.
what you think about that.
People that would wrestle with this, John, and say, I agree. I don't disagree. I just don't know how to experience that. And I'd say,
Mm,
I've said this many times that God does love you, whether you receive it or not. The problem is not have you earned it or is it there? Is it real? It's what is keeping you from embracing and enjoying the
yeah,
words that you've just spoken to us. And
yeah,
for some reason, we only receive the love that we think we deserve. And so we don't look at what's been done for us. We only look at what we've done, and we do some math in our head. On a scale of
hmm
1 to 10, being brutally honest, where's my relationship with Jesus right now? We're really hesitant to say anything over a 7 because we go, well, I on the way here and I listened to that and I should have said it something and I didn't. And the things we did, the things we didn't do, we do some math in our head, we deduct a few points and we'll never get above that 5 to 7. If it's 8 and you're judging your own works, you're arrogant. Deduct 2. Like that's not right. So, but I think the only reality is 0 or 10. And it's not based on what we do. It's based on what's been done for us, and
yeah,
and receiving that. I mean, letting somebody jump on a grenade for you. No one ever asks, "Can I do this for you?" They do it, and you appreciate it for the rest of your life. The Saving Private Ryan moment. I agree.
yeah,
Where, John Miller, the captain, says, "Earn this." That's that scene. He lives his whole life, comes back to John Miller's tomb. Like a 50th reunion of the Normandy invasion. He says, I lived my life the best I could. I hope that was enough for you. It's like, I think we live that way. Like come before God. I've done the best I could. I hope that's enough for
yeah.
you. It's an odd thing. Like our part of that does not change God's part of the equation. It's
That's
whether or
right.
not we accept God's part of the equation.
That's right.
And our
And
behavior
and
is secondary in that equation.
and I would say this, it's up to whether we experience
Yes. Yeah.
that part of the equation. You cannot
Yeah.
theology your way into this fourth
Hmm.
aha.
No.
You
Mm.
experience your way into it. So here's how I experience my way into being convinced of my
Yeah.
identity, God's affection and his approval of me. I find places where I experience
Mm.
that and I park there.
Yeah.
So you know where I feel that? I feel that when I'm watching the ocean waves
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
watching the sun come up over the ocean in the morning.
Yeah.
I feel loved by
Yeah.
God in those moments. I
Yeah.
feel loved by God when I'm alone with Him and it's just me and Him. And I'm not necessarily saying anything, but we're just enjoying wherever we are
Yeah.
together. And I feel His nearness to me and
Yeah.
His friendship toward me. I feel loved when I go to church and I we worship and I can forget about who's around me for a moment, and I envision Jesus on his throne and the Father there, and them
Yeah.
just saying, "Come closer to me, John. Come
Yeah. Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
Let
Can't get enough of you.
let
Yeah.
me love you."
Yeah.
And so, Pastor, you're not going to theology your way into this fourth aha. You're going to experience your way
Right.
into it. So so those are the four, Jim. The ministry I lead
Love it,
wasn't my idea,
man.
was God's, not my baby, it's his.
Yeah.
And no matter what happens, he has my best interest in mind. Pain is my greatest teacher. Not everything I try is going to work, and that's all right.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I'm a son who's perfectly loved by his father and with me is well pleased. And
Right
so
on.
my hope is that this first episode of
Yeah.
2025 sets the tone for an incredible year for you who are watching and listening today.
Right on. What a great dedication, right? The 2025, the year I learned to let God love me the way He's always
Mm,
wanted to. What a great goal to put on your to-do list for a year, to let
yes,
God love me the way He loves me, and not disagree with His verdict on my worth. Yeah, right
right.
on. Thanks, John. Beautiful. Thank you so much for this. And those of you who are watching and listening, I'm sitting here choking up thinking about all this. I don't know that I'll ever get accustomed to being loved that way, or should I even try. So the amazing grace of God, the amazing love of God, may it wash over you in this year. And if you're like, I get it, but I don't get it, or I get it, but I disagree, or I get it, but you don't know what I've done. Sometimes it's good to have somebody like a John, me, or others on our team to be a part of your story. We're not here for any greater reason than God has given us a grace to be here. We love pastors and leaders, and we'd love to be a part of your story, especially as it pertains to this. So if you'd like to have a conversation, give us a call, connect with us, convergecoach.com. There's that link right there. I'd like to have 30 minutes. And I've had a couple of these in this last week. They're good. They are good.
Mm,
They cost you nothing, but there's a great value to them. And sometimes it's the beginning of a long-term relationship. Sometimes 30 minutes is all we need, but we love having them. So God bless you. Happy New Year, and keep going for it. This is gonna be a great year. Let's if we let God love us the way He wants to in this next year, it could be the greatest year of our lives. We're praying for you, and we're on your team. We're on your side. We're the wind in your sails as you continue to lead from alignment.